Hello, everybody, all you citizens of the world. Welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. This is number 97 in the time of the pandemic, since we've been doing it and calling it Heartland at Home. This is for the week of April 16th in the year 2022. We've got a number of good guests today. We're going to have Carlos Cumpian, a longtime Chicano activist and a poet. We're going to have the labor organizer and analyst, Bob Lawson, and our own Lynn Orman, our music producer, is going to join us and hip us to a few things going on. One good thing going on, despite the slight uptick in COVID cases in Chicago, Dr. Allison Arwady, that's A-R-W-A-D-Y, who is the commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health, pointed out that Chicago is seeing the fewest number of deaths due to COVID since the start of the pandemic. That's some really good news. Some bad news is another young Black man was shot and killed, this time in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was an immigrant from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and I think he was about 26 years old, and he was in a car which had incorrect license plates. He ran from the officer and he struggled, and he is now dead. And so there's a lot of looking into it and a lot of concern. Another gun incident, this time in the hands of someone who was not a law enforcement person, but in Brooklyn. I'm sure you are all aware that there was a subway shooting. Over 30 people were wounded on Tuesday or injured in some way. The suspect is now in custody, and we don't know the motivation, but once again, there's a lot of guns out there in the hands of people who shouldn't have them, and it's an issue that we need to pay ongoing attention to. Environmentally, let's just talk about the record rainfall and the devastating floods that have hit South Africa, and in other parts of Africa, there's a very severe drought. And there's also the ongoing question of how different disasters in the world are dealt with. A lot of attention to the Ukraine, but not so much attention to countries in sub-Saharan Africa that have had disasters, as well as Yemen, etc. And the whole question of who gets let in to the country seeking refuge. We know that Ukrainians have been welcome, Afghanistanis have been welcome, but people from Central and South America who've been coming are still being held up on the border. Something is not correct and is not aligned, it's out of whack. In Philadelphia, they've gone back to mask mandates indoors. In Texas, Governor Abbott has increased inspections for commercial trucks that are crossing the border from Mexico. He's doing this in retaliation to some immigration policies by the president. And he's created quite a scene there on the border with trucks being held up. And now the Mexican truckers are kind of blocking it from the other side. This is a little bit out of control, and even trade groups and businesses that are supportive of this right-wing Governor Abbott are questioning the whole thing and say the situation cannot be sustained. Okay, labor, we got a little thing here on the revolution is here, says Chris Smalls, who is the head of the newly formed Amazon Labor Union in New York's Staten Island. And we're going to have more discussion on labor shortly with our guest, Bob Lawson. That probably is enough for our little introduction. We're going to get ready to bring on a guest. First, we're going to hear a little bit of music, and we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. Our next guest is a guy I first met back in 1969. We were above Oxford's pub at, I forget the name of the theater, but we had the Rising Up Angry office, and the first person to come to the office who was not a member of the fledgling organization was this guy, Carlos Cumpian, a longtime Chicano activist, wonderful citizen of Chicago, a poet, and back then kind of a hippie. And he picked up copies of Rising Up Angry to sell. And ever since then, we've been running into each other. Good morning to you, Carlos.
Buenos dias. Hey, man. Good morning.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, I was taking those copies of RUA all the way down to Roseland, brother, man. I would take them down there and I'd sell them down on Michigan Avenue. And people would say, where the hell did you get this? I said, up on the north side. People say, that figures, South Siders, north side, Yeah, but it was, your journal was a eye-opening journal, as were many things back in the day. And you've always been in the forefront of doing interesting alternative media. So, yeah, poetry.
We're glad to have you here.
Say it again.
I say we're really glad to have you here.
Well, I am glad to be
the last
here.
The last time you were on the show, we were talking about Ana Castillo. An event was we were talking about Carlos Cupien, not Carlos Cupien, Carlos Cortez.
Right.
And you've been to an event recently for Ana Castillo, who is a friend of yours, and we know her. Kind of a Chicago legend. Tell us about that event.
Well, basically, Thursday, March 24th, this year, 2022, we had a Fuller Award for her lifetime achievement that was given by the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, and it was celebrated at the American Writers Museum on Michigan Avenue, and we had a full house there. And Ana came in from Nuevo Mexico, from New Mexico, where she is basically doing her camping and her writing, preparing for the release of 2 new books, and they'll become forthcoming in 2023. The one I'm really looking forward to is her dystopian novel that's going to be coming out. And she says everything is like, where are we headed? And, with this environmental issues, and of course, the political issues that are happening. And even over in Europe, she's maybe right on the money with this new novel. But her novel, I want to tell you what I found out, is that it's going to take place in not only in the future, but it also flashing back to the fall of Tenochtitlan in 1519, 1521, going back 500 years. And so she's going to be doing some very interesting, I think, material. But Ana was very well celebrated. And as we know, she's been at the forefront. In fact, I want to stress this. Everybody should know Ana Castillo clearly is the first Mexican-American, Chicana, indigenous woman in the state of Illinois, not just Chicago, but in the whole entire state of Illinois, possibly in the Midwest, to come out with a small book of poetry that I know of in the 20th century. Now, if you can do me one better and prove me different, I'm happy to hear that. But Ana,
there are no small books of poetry out there?
Her small book of poetry was called Otro Canto, and it was what we call small book, also known as chap book. And so she came out with this book, and it was the other Latino that kind of ran ahead of her and pioneered the chapbook for us in the 20th century was none other than David Hernandez, the Puerto Rican poet. We all remember him. And
David Hernandez. I remember David well.
Yes, and David's book, he pirated that book down at the McCormick Seminary's basement. He ran it off on I think a combo of an electrostatic machine and a mimeograph, slapped it together, went out on the streets and sold it for 50 cents. The book was called Despertando, Waking Up, and that was David's first little book with big industrial staples on the side. But we've come a long way since then. And of course, Ana is a very celebrated poet, author, essayist, and she's actually had recently, I think it was the 25th anniversary of her book of essays published by the University of New Mexico Press called Massacre of the Dreamers. And that is a must read for anyone seriously interested in Chicanismo, the struggle and the understanding of Chicana feminism.
Well, Carlos, speaking of all these other poets, you yourself are a poet and you have a number of books out, and you can tell us about those, but I want to know about your new book. It's called Human Cicada.
Yeah.
And I want to know where the title came from and what it means, and tell us about the book, and then we'll get you to read one of them.
Okay, man, here it is. Human Cicada. I back in 2011, I had a book, a small chapbook called 14 Abriles, 14 Aprils, right? this little book came out, self-published, and in there I did an afterword, and I mentioned that between the time it took me to come out with something in 2011 and coming out with my Tia Chucha Press Armadillo Charm book, that was 1996. This is 2011. I said I must be on some kind of Cicada schedule, popping up with these books, taking a long time. Now, the human cicada thing comes from the fact that we all know the cicada is kind of an annoying sound. It makes all this rattling, buzzing sound, and some people go nuts with it when they come out. And I will reveal that, having been a veteran teacher working around very loud decibels, from 9 hours a day, and for 20 something years, it affected my hearing. And so I have what's called tinnitus. So I never have a moment that's not where I hear the equivalent of the cicadas ringing. And that's what's happening. I'm always hearing that sound. It's always buzzing in my head. So I'm a human cicada, man.
Oh, what a lucky guy.
How about a poem?
Tell us more about the book. Who's publishing the book? When is it coming out? And you have a big event around it. You're going to do a reading and opening, that kind of thing. So fill us in a little bit more, Carlos.
So the book itself is published in New Mexico. The publisher is located in the Santa Fe, New Mexico area. Her name is Odilia Gavan Rodriguez. She is a former Chicagoan who in the 80s read somewhere in the Heartland paper that people were going back to the country. Maybe she's a Lester Dory article, and she said, "Oh, I got to go to the country." So she left Chicago, and she has been in Texas, and now she's in New Mexico, and she decided to start a small press. So it's a Chicana owned and operated small press, and she reached out to me 2 years ago and asked me if I would be interested in publishing with her, and so we kind of held off. We were working on the manuscript rather with one hand, only because of the fact that we never knew when COVID was going to break, and there was no reason to really launch this thing. So, but the launch that we're going to have will be Thursday, the 28th of April, 2022 at 7 p.m. at the National Museum of Mexican Art at 1852 West 19th Street there in beautiful Pilsen. So people, you all can come on down.
Tell me that date again.
It's going to be the 28th of April.
Oh, good. I'll be back around in town. I'm going out of town.
Well, if you're there, you're there. If not, we'll catch you on the rebound. We'll probably do another reading somewhere. But as far as I can tell you, we intend to have copies of the new book. So there should be new copies out. We're the formal launch. So basically, it's the end of April, formal launch. It was supposed to have come out in May, but the horses were chomping at the bit, and we decided to run with it. So here we go with that. I'm going to read you, though, a poem, if I may, about.
That's what I want. I want a poem.
I'm going to read you a poem, not from my brand new book. I'm going to read you a really short poem about a topic that I know has been on the minds of many, many people. And you've been to Mexico, you know the conditions, you've seen what life is like there, and the struggle it can be for people is what we're talking about. But this poem was from my very first book, and during the Carter years, I wrote this poem. So here, let's see what has changed. Okay, America needs operation jobs. Lee Trevino found missing, or Pancho Villa, where are you now that we need you? 250 arrested on Tuesday, 100 seized on Monday. The raid sites were set on Sunday, so thousands might be ousted by the immigration forces. Another page of raza humiliation aquí in the windy city of Chicano, Illinois. It was mostly Mexicanos, so will they be missed down at City Hall? These sweeps only make good copy for a day, but it does have something to say about making jobs available the old American way. Damn, what really gets me mad is how Juan Valdez was treated like a peon by the press. You know, our connoisseur of the coffee cup. He was mistakenly grabbed. I mean, just picked up. Hell, you think they'd recognize him after all the commercials? Now, don't count on those restaurant meals being made as fast as before, because they just dragged the entire kitchen crew out the back door.
Yeah, I remember running a restaurant and having all kind of concerns about immigration. We were never very, we welcomed people no matter where they came from and what their legal status was. So that was from which book? That was one of your earlier books.
That was from my early book, Coyote's Son.
I think I had that one somewhere, Carlos.
Probably, yeah, you got you a copy. They're still available. There'll be some available. I'll bring some out to the museum for that reading. But I'm going to read you a quick poem that covers two topics. And again, this is the question of immigration. I'm going to go back a little earlier with my own experience crossing the frontera, and and maybe we'll just move off from there. So here we go. This is called Fronterizo Shopping Trip. That means border for shopping trip. It's 1965. My grandma's youngest son, my tío Tony, AKA Junior, and his girlfriend Grace drove us across the Rio Grande from the Texas border town of Eagle Pass to shop. And there I am with my primo Pino and I. We sat in the rear with us, our unsmiling grandma, Jesusa. All our skins were branded brown by summer sun, and we sat mutely as the Border Patrol waved us over and asked, "Where y'all from? Where y'all headed? When you coming back?" Well, my tío at the wheel, confident in his crew cut and a smile as bright as his white t-shirt, answered in his command of Anglo speak, "Oh, we're going just a quick trip. We're going to just stop and get a couple of baked goods." Well, his girlfriend teased him that he sounded just like a gringo TV actor on her favorite soap opera, Days of Our Lives. Piedras Negras shopping was a quick sweep down a thin street full of bargains of discounted crackers, bimbo bread, vanilla cookies, countless bundles of comics without covers, Mexican cakes and candies, plus a few tablecloths. Well, my Uncle Tony, he bought a round container of waxy pomade, La Parrot, to train his hair. Between sips of his Coke, he said, "It beats Vaseline petroleum jelly, and it smells better too." On our way back to our car, a skinny girl followed us, holding a wrinkled bag, calling out, "Se venden aguacates 25 centavos. Well, she had 4 ready-to-eat, bumpy-skinned, palm-sized heft of tropical butter treats, all for 25 cents. My grandma gave her 50 cents, 2 American quarters, which dashed my hopes of buying some brand new comic books with her money. Instead, I had to look at my tío's girlfriend's all Spanish language comics. There was one about a black school kid, Mimine, who wore a bright striped white t-shirt, and a ball cap and a big smile that rivaled my uncle's. Back at the border crossing gate, we slowed to a stop, and the driver's side guard asked, "You got anything to declare? Any fresh fruits, vegetables, fresh cuts of meats, maybe a pet for the kids?" The big-nosed blonde guy at the other car, on the car's other side, well, he scratched his afternoon chin and said, "What's in the bag, Granny?" And he pointed with his fat fingers. At that, my grandma had that cradled in her lap. He reached down that rolled down window and he snatched the dusty bag. "What are these?" "Avocados." "Going to have to keep these, take to Texas." Disappointment seeped from my grandmama's frown. And my uncle, he apologized in his best English that his mom wasn't thinking clearly. She must have made that purchase while he wasn't looking. And then they just smiled and smirked and said, as if they were the Beatles, said in unison, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and waved us to leave. Abuela said, "Pinches rinches como siempre." And then she pulled out a single hidden avocado from her apron, peeled it, and offered us each a bite. But we didn't take a taste of that warm green butter. Instead, we asked for cookies. My uncle said, Don't you kids make a mess in my car." And my grandma replied, "You like it to drive? Okay, you shut up. My primo Pino exclaimed, Abuela, you can speak English. And the whole car laughed. All right.
So tell me how many books you got out now, Carlos.
Well, this is the fifth book. This marks my fifth book. My first, like I said, was Coyote. Then my second was done for young adults or for youngsters. It was called Latino Rainbow. It was praise poems about people of achievement. And the third book was the Tia Chucha Press book with Armadillo. Fourth one was the 14 Abriles, 14 Aprils. And my brand new one, again, is the Human Cicada book. So that's it.
Well, you're doing really good. You're cranking them out. And I
don't know if I'm cranking them, but thank you. I'm working on it.
What do you do besides do poetry and put out books?
Well, the big project, I'm going to repeat this big project. Here it is. As we published, when I was running the press for March Abrazo, the March Abrazo Press, we published back in the early 90s, we published the illustrious poet and printmaker Carlos Cortez Coyo Cuica. We published his book. You may have remembered that. And I know he'd exhibited many times via the Heartland, not only in the paper, but on your walls. Now, we're going to be doing, I'm working with David Ranney, and I'm working with a number of people. We're putting together for August 2023, 100th birthday observance of Carlos Cortez, Coyo Cuica. We're going to come out with a book through the Charles H. Kerr Publishing Company. We're going to do the selected art and the collected works of Carlos A. Cortez Coyo Cuica. And it's coming out in time for August of 2023, his 100th anniversary birthday. So
that'll be great. We miss Carlos.
We do.
Glad we still got you, Carlos.
Hey, that's a different Carlos, brother. I know nobody's going to replace Cortez, but we had a good relationship with him, and everybody who's ever worked with Carlos has fond memories of him. We will be, by the way, I just need to let everyone know who's listening, who tuned in, we will be contacting certain people out there who feel they know or are comfortable with his work. If they've read his work or have his books, check it out. And eventually we may call on various people to come on that day and read aloud.
Well, I got a couple nice photographs of him over the years, and I'll show them to you. Tell us one more time when your book reading is going to be at the Mexican Museum.
My book reading is scheduled for April 28th. That's a Thursday coming up, April 28th at 7 p.m. at the Mexican Museum of the National Mexican Museum of Art at 1852 West 19th Street. And it's free admission. Come on in and give a listen. We're going to have a Q&A afterwards. We'll do about 30 minutes of poetry from the brand new book, and then we'll have a Q&A for about 20, 25 minutes maximum. And call it a night. We'll sell some books, maybe, and that's it. And I'm
looking forward to it. I'm going to try and make that. Is there anything going on with the Chicano and the Latino, the Latinx community in Chicago that you want to share with our listeners before we go out?
I just want to say, people right now are wondering the big question, and you've probably heard about this, that there was all this. First of all, there are a lot of people in the Mexican American Puerto Rican community angry about the fact that teachers in our youth schools, I mean, we're talking about elementary schools, teachers there, and some high schools are getting laid off. We don't like that. We don't want that. We need teachers, and they're going to be doing some cutbacks. So we need to find out what's going on there. We don't want to lose any teachers. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is we want to make sure that there's something that can, if the mayor is willing to invite the Ukrainian people to come to Chicago, I hope she's looking to invite some of the people escaping the wars in the south of the border, okay, Spanish-speaking people. Okay, that's pretty much.
That's good. Next time you come on, we'll talk about your organization, Mexicano 2070.
Yeah.
We'll talk about more books and your observations. Yeah. Carlos Cumpien, the longtime amigo. Great to have you on the show, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week at your opening.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hasta luego y buena suerte, compa. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland. This one is number 97 in the time of the pandemic. And once again, I am honored to bring on a very good friend of mine, someone I've looked up to over the years for his political acumen and his commitment to the cause, the one, the only Robert Bob Lawson. Good morning to you, Bob.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Well, you and I go way back. We met in Uptown when we both had left Berkeley to come work at Join Community Union. And I think you had spent a little time before that in Mississippi. You also had been a linebacker on the Cal football team. I always like that for jocks who are political. And after Join, you went down to Cincinnati. We were trying to figure out how to get some more white kids to leave school and go into poor and working white neighborhoods. You spent some time in Cincinnati, then you were up in Detroit, and then you came back to the fledgling new Rising Up Angry, and we worked together for a number of years doing a lot of things. Then you went off to run a labor camp or political campaign, I think, for Tom Hayden when he was running for Senate in California. And since then, you had all kinds of jobs working for various labor unions. Tell us a little bit about your work in labor, why it's so important, and that's a good way to start.
Okay, well, I'll start actually in Uptown was when I learned a lot about labor, because there was a lot of the old mine workers there, as you remember, who moved up to Chicago. And sort of the concept behind Join was Join Community Union. It was built on people sticking together, having more power, and building institutional power to improve people's lives and improve their communities. That was really all I knew about unions. And when I went to work on the Tom Hayden campaign in 1976, he was running for the U.S. Senate as an anti-war candidate at the time. Since I had been working with young working class people, that they said, well, you could be the labor coordinator for our campaign statewide. So I had to learn a huge amount about the institutional labor movement and what it had done for the country and what was actually developing then. And at the time then in California is that the teachers' unions were finally beginning to organize, because public employees had not previously been covered under the laws that allowed private sector workers to unionize. So many of the people that came out of the civil rights movement and came out of the student movement were going into public service jobs to give back to their community, and they began organizing public sector workers, teachers first, and then in other parts of the country. The other piece of the labor movement that was really exciting to me at the time was the United Farm Workers in California were organizing some of the poorest, most exploited people. That farm workers and domestic workers had also been excluded from the Federal National Labor Relations Act and didn't have a legal right to form a union. They were excluded from those laws because at the time the laws was passed during the New Deal, they were primarily Black workers, and the Southern Democrats didn't want them to have the rights to have a union, so they were excluded. So in California, the farm workers had to fight to get a new law passed and to organize the workers. And they were building a really big national movement to support the farm workers, to boycott grapes and to boycott wine, lettuce. And so after Tom Hayden did not win that election, but went on to actually part of the goal of the election campaign was to organize an organization statewide of progressive people. And they went on to organize, I think it was, I can't remember the name of the organization, but it helped build power in local communities and elect progressive people in California for many years. I got so excited about the farm workers movement that I went to work with United Farm Workers in California. And at that time, we were organizing farm workers to, have the union have a voice on the job, et cetera. And it was there that I actually learned a huge amount about organizing to form a union, to have union elections, to bargain a contract, and to see what employers would do to fight unions. So that was sort of my entry into the labor movement. After that, I was lucky enough, as I moved back to Chicago, that I was hired by AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, because when, as people who are of a certain age will remember, when Jane Byrne was elected, she said she would give public city employees the right to form a union. And like so many things that Jane Byrne said, she didn't tell the truth. But I started working for AFSCME at the time. And at that time, public sector workers around the country were organizing, including in Illinois. State workers were organizing with AFSCME. And eventually, when Harold Washington was running for mayor, he also promised that city employees could have the right to form a union. So I went to work for the Harold Washington campaign. I was loaned there by AFSCME, and we won the campaign, obviously. And so we went on to organize the city employees in Chicago, and that helped pass a state law giving all public employees in Illinois the right to collective bargaining. And so then we went on to organize county employees, school district employees, et cetera, into AFSCME. So that was really how I jumped into the labor movement, and spent a lot of my life in mainly public sector organizing in the labor movement around the country.
Well, you've done a lot of great work, Bob. And one of the things that both you and I know, and some of the older people know about the importance and the impact of the labor movement in this country in bringing about better conditions. And we saw labor, rise for many years and become quite powerful. We saw the rise of unions that actually didn't do as much for the workers as they said they were going to do. And then we saw a kind of a vicious attack ongoing to suppress labor unions. Maybe you could share a little bit of your insights into how important labor has been for the country, and how then the membership has declined. And all of a sudden, I think we're in a time where we can be a little bit more optimistic. There seems to be a lot of action happening. You're the guy that knows more about it than anyone I know, so fill us in.
Well, the height, unions have always been about working people coming together to exert power both on the job and in the community. As a result, sort of the, I would say, the desperation of the Great Depression in the 1920s, and then the need to pull the country together in World War II, is that there was a major push with FDR to pass the National Labor Relations Act, which was a law that gave workers the right to form a union against the opposition of huge amounts of employers. That led to a massive unionization. People who had all these years been really treated like crap, and they came together to form unions. That from the beginning, when that law was passed, that employers have sought to undermine it in many, many ways, not just employers, but their political lapdogs, or whatever you want to call them. And so that what the unions did, though, along with actually giving people a voice at the job, they negotiate, for people that don't know, they actually negotiate a collective bargaining agreement with the employer that covers wages, benefits, working conditions, et cetera. And it's a legally binding contract between the employer and the workers. Unionized workers, even still, but have always made more money, had better benefits, and so on. At the height of the labor movement in the I believe it was the 50s or 60s, that 30% of the workforce was in unions. That was the time where unions would set the standard for pay, even for non-union workers. And that as part of their role, that unions also helped their members have a better political understanding of what was going on and involve people in politics in a much more democratic fashion than they had, because this was a critical organization in their lives. And in many communities, particularly in Chicago and working class communities, the union hall was a social opportunity too, as people hung out at the union hall, et cetera. When you think about all of the, the rubber works, the auto parts plants, the bakeries, et cetera. People who've been around for a while can remember that their grandparents probably talked about going to the union meeting or the union Christmas party, and the kids were dragged along, or out on the picket line. And unions, have done that in the country forever. But what happened, and this, I'm trying to make a long history really short here because we don't have a lot of time, but at the time that the unions were the strongest, inequality in wealth and in the racial wealth gap was the slimmest. Wasn't eliminated, but it was the slimmest. And that unions particularly gave Black people entree into the middle class as they moved up from the South and worked in the industrialized unions. And then when public sector began to cease discrimination, that African Americans could move into civil service jobs, and then those became unionized jobs. And so for working class people, of all races, that unions have been a stepping stone to the middle class. And for young people today, they don't understand that when you and I were growing up, most people, that if they came out of high school, they could get a union job and they would have a pension, they would have health insurance, their kids could go to college, they could afford a home. And it was more true for white workers and for other workers. But that's the role that unions have played. And unions also played a major role in helping make our society more progressive. That the United Auto Workers was a major funder and backer of the March on Washington with Martin Luther King. And for those of us on the other thing, the UAW was also an initial supporter of Students for a Democratic Society. And so not just, it's not just that, but I'm trying to summarize a lot of history really quickly. And what happened is that as part of the overall right-wing assault on, our society that began big time when Barry Goldwater ran for president, but then happened most strikingly when Ronald Reagan was president, there has been a massive and ongoing campaign to destroy unions. Ronald Reagan fired the air traffic controllers when they went on strike. That had never happened in the past, and gave employers the thumbs up to doing everything they could to both destroy existing unions and also to prevent people from unionizing. That, coupled with the deindustrialization of our society, and also the globalization, where companies moved work overseas, like to Mexico or to China or to Vietnam, where they could pay workers penny on the dollar, and that decimated a lot of unions. And then in the South, which had traditionally been anti-union, companies moved down there. And because the labor laws had been so weakened, it's very difficult for people to organize unions in the private sector. So right now, unionization is about 10% nationally and only 6% in the private sector, whereas it had been 30%. And you can do graphs. I don't have any with me right now, but as the union membership has declined, the wealth inequality has increased. It's a direct relationship.
We hear these days of a comeback of unions. There's a lot of talk about the workers have the advantage. We've seen a defeat in Bessemer, Alabama, but a bunch of stuff going on around that that plant down there, and I'm blocking Amazon, it's called. We also saw an Amazon plant in Staten Island just have a victory. We see a whole bunch of Starbucks is organizing. There's some, food workers in California. Even probably in other places, there's lots going on. I did want to just throw in here that somewhere I read that Alabama used to have a higher rate of union membership than a lot of other southern states because the steel workers were there. But tell us a little bit about the opportunities for labor right now, what you see happening and what you see as the comeback or the pay, the resistance from the corporations.
Well, because the law, basically, in the past, I would say a couple of decades, it's been virtually impossible to organize a private sector place because the companies run such strong anti-union campaigns, and even when they break the law, there's no punishment for them. If, for example, if they fire someone during an organizing campaign to scare everyone else, the very worst thing that happens to them is maybe several years later, they have to post something on the bulletin board that says they won't violate the law anymore. And they can offer, if they totally lose the case, they'll have to offer the person their job back and pay them back wages, except subtracting all the money that the person made in between. So it's almost a nothing. And even when workers win the union election, that companies quite often never bargain a contract. They delay. And even when they're found to have violated the law and not bargain in good faith, the remedy has been that they have to bargain in good faith. So the law is so weak. So workers don't have the advantage legally. What's happened, I think, is that people are just sick and tired of being treated like crap and about the wage inequality that's going on right now. And that people realize, particularly young people, are looking around and seeing there's no future for me being treated like this. And the companies are making, if you talk about Amazon, Starbucks, whatever, are making billions of dollars. We could go on about how there's inflation is being largely caused by corporate greed, but I don't want to do that. But what's happening right now is there is an uprising, particularly of young people, that I don't have the exact number right here. The number of union elections filed for this year is like double what it has been in the past. The number of strikes has gone up. There's been you were talking about Alabama, there's been a coal miners' strike for a year down there of people who are not going back there. It's like a vision of the old coal miners who stood up. So the other thing that's happening is places that in the past have gotten away with treating people really poorly, but paying their CEOs huge sums, like the Art Institute of Chicago really recently organized with AFSCME, and sort of arts employees, semi-professional employees around the country are unionizing and starting to win, partly because it's the wealth inequality is so gross and the way that people are treated. So now you see, the Amazon plant in Staten Island, where those workers self-organized and won. And you listen to those workers talk. A, is that they're really smart. And B, is that they are just sick of it, and that their lives, they have their whole lives in front of them. And if something doesn't change, they don't want to live like this for the rest of their lives. And I think the other really inspiring thing to me is the Starbucks workers and other workers like them around the country. There's over 200 Starbucks locations that have filed for union elections now, including, I think, 6 in the Chicago area. There's actually, if people are interested in the details of how employers fight this, there's a really nice article that's in the Reader that's dated yesterday about the Logan Square Starbucks and about what's happening there for workers just want to have a little better say in the job. And the last, I believe it's 4 or 5 Starbucks elections that have been held, a couple in Boston, one in Eugene, Oregon, one in Philadelphia, the employer got 0 votes and the union got 100%. And that's after waging massive anti-union campaigns that spending millions of dollars to try and scare workers, to tell them that they have it really good and it's going to get worse with the union, and that the union will treat them badly, trying to sow racial divisions, etc. And the other thing that's happened that gives a little bit of inspiration is that Biden has appointed some very good people to the National Labor Relations Board, particularly the general counsel. This is, way in the weeds, but they are actually going back to the original vision of the law, which says the purpose of the law is to give workers the right to organize a union. And so they are trying to enforce the law as it should be enforced. It's still a long, long way to go, and that employers still have sort of all the legal handles. But the exciting thing to me is that workers all over the place, particularly young workers, are saying, enough is enough. I don't hate my company. The Starbucks workers aren't saying I hate Starbucks. They say, just live up to your rhetoric. You say you're a progressive country. You're for, racial equality. Why did you fire 7 baristas in Memphis on the Martin Luther King holiday for trying to organize a union? This is I think it's a critical time right now, as more and more young workers are seeing we can take this in our own hands and try to shape our future in a way. What I'm hoping, I don't want to predict, but I'm hoping when you look at the age of many of these young workers, they're about the same age as the people who led the sit-ins in the 60s, the GIs in Vietnam who said, I'm not taking this anymore, the students who protested against the war, that people are feeling a sense of, if we're not going to do it, who's going to do it? And I feel good about myself by doing something righteous for myself and my family and my community. And the thing that's happening is that people are getting support all over the place. When these workers at Starbucks are organizing, people are going in and saying union yes and writing notes on the bulletin board, and they hear the companies organizing an anti-union campaign and they get the word out. And so all kinds of people from the community come and sit there next to the managers. So I do think it's an optimistic time. I think the law is still horrible. And people are just going to have to keep pushing.
Well, we say up the union, and there are 3.5 million new voters, just turning 18, and that point about the young people and taking a stand. So I'll see you soon, Bob, and we'll have you back on the show in about a month, and you can talk about more progress. We hope we're moving in a good direction. My love to your whole family, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Uh-huh.
We'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. We'll take a little musical break. We'll be right back with our music producer, Lynn Orman. This is Michael James. I'm your host this week. And next week, some of you will be real glad because Katy Hogan will be back, and maybe I'll be on too. But if so, it'll be from the water somewhere like down in Florida. So I'm really happy to have Lynn Orman on. She is our music producer. She continues to get us great people to come on the show, a lot of great music. 4 years ago, we had Muddy Waters' son on, and I think Lynn's going to tell us about that. And someday we'll replay that segment. But good morning to you, Lynn. How are you?
Michael, it's so good to see you and talk to you in a great place other than the dentist chair.
Well, I've been going to the dentist a lot. I'm an old guy. I'm gonna, they're working on it. Anyhow,
Yeah.
I was driving back from the YMCA up in Evanston last Sunday, and I turned on the radio and I heard a familiar voice when I pushed my third or fourth button on the car radio, and it was you and your show, and you were thanking me for the slogan, "Do good in the world needs all the good that we do." Tell us about your show and when people can hear you on the radio playing the tunes that you select.
I'm so happy you listened. And yeah, I've been doing that the last couple of weeks because that's my favorite phrase. And I want to encourage people to do good in the world, right? So I'm on Sundays, 2 to 4 p.m. That's the Roots block on WNUR from Northwestern University.
I call it a sister station.
Of course, we are, a college radio. So we are based out of the university at Northwestern, like you at Loyola. And I've been there for going on 15 years. I've been going on 12 years with you.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you started showing up at the Heartland and bringing us some great guests. One of the things, we were going to have a guest named Michael Frank on today, and he's a man who has produced a lot of great music, and he has a new film out, and he's also a good citizen because he couldn't come today because he's had to go to jury duty. And I know some of us have skipped jury duty in our lives, but Michael Frank has showed up, and I hope it goes well for whatever he gets involved with. But tell us about his new movie, 6 Generations of the Blues, from Mississippi to Chicago.
Well, Michael Frank absolutely he's a citizen of Rogers Park, but he's a citizen of the world. And that goes without saying to the blues world too. He's coming up on his 41st year of recording blues music, and actually started at Jazz Record Mart with Bob Kester, where he found these blues guys down in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and was so taken by them that he told Bob Kester and somebody else that went down with him to Clarksdale, "You've got to hear these guys." And they were Big Jack Johnson, Sam Carr, and Frank Frost, better known as the Jelly Roll Kings. And that was his first CD. And Bob encouraged him. And Michael was a social worker, and he was only going to do one recording. And Bob Kester said, if you're gonna record, if you're gonna have a record label, you gotta do more than one. So, he's been doing it now for 41 years. And this is sort of a culmination, wonderful interviews, up close and personal interviews with people like David Honeyboy Edwards, talking about the first time he met Robert Johnson in Greenville, Mississippi. And, Big Jack Johnson in Clarksdale, and Studs Terkel has a little cameo in it, Bob Kester, of course. And they all recorded, Studs Terkel and Bob Kester didn't record for Earwig, but these 6 generations of the blues of artists, including John Primer and Bob Corritor and the young artists that were coming up. So it's really about that rural Mississippi journey and the migration to Chicago. And we are, I'm just honored to have been involved with it. I produced the live show at Space, where all of these guys performed together, including Charlie Musselwhite and Sugar Blue, Dave Spector, a lot of guys. I don't know if you were there, Michael.
I wasn't. I was just thinking, Lynn, you got to drag me around a little bit more.
I would love to. I would, and it was like the first or second year that Space in Evanston was open. And so besides for this unbelievable archival footage of H-Bomb Ferguson and Sunnyland Slim, these iconic performances, there's also footage at Space in Evanston, and it's being live streamed on April 29th on a platform called mandolin.com. And although we're regaining, a lot of live music, which is amazing, everything's getting booked, I think live streams, they kind of saved our life over the last 2 years. Really, the live streams have helped with ticket sales and venues and put money in artists' pockets and tip jars. So we're doing this live stream, and our audience, our listeners, can go to sixgenerationsoftheblues.com, and it's SIX, sixgenerationsoftheblues.com, or mandolin.com.
I'm looking forward. I have a bunch of the trailers that I'm going to watch. I'm learning about how we use video on our show and what format it has to be. We only have about a minute left. So 4 years ago, you reminded me that one of Muddy Waters' sons came on our show, and it was a good interview, and we'll replay it soon. He passed away. Tell us about him, and then we'll go out with a tune dedicated to him that was written by our friend Terry Abramson and Derek Procell, and I think Derek performs the tune.
He does.
It's called Muddy Road. So tell us about Joseph Morganfield and the song, and thank you very much for coming on, Lynn.
That was such a great day. We did that in the studio. It was his birthday. You and Katy had a ball. I just listened to the interview. You can find it on YouTube, and it's really great. Big Sox fan. Basketball.
Yeah, he was all dressed up in Sox outfits. We hit it off. In fact, I'll dig up a photograph I took of that day and send it to Emilio so he can include it in the video broadcast of this.
I just posted it. If you go to my Facebook page, Lynn Orman Weiss, I just posted it and thanked the Heartland for airing that interview. He died unexpectedly of a heart attack, December 10th, 2 years ago now. It'll be 2 years in December. Today would have been his heavenly birthday, and we're going to actually pay tribute to him this afternoon. We're going to Delmark Records. His song is called "Good to Be King." That one was written by Tony Brunigal. It is one of the top streamed songs on Airplay on Spotify, and features Billy Branch and Ronnie Baker Brooks and John Cockey. And when he was on our show, he was just starting out. He didn't even have an EP out. And I saw him just develop into this amazing singer and performer. And he's so greatly and dearly missed. I really miss him a lot.
Well, we're going to go out with that other tune by, where did I put it? Tell me the guy's name again. It's Derek Procell.
Yeah.
It's called Muddy Road. Thank you, Lynn Orman. And thank everybody who's listening in. We're going to cut it real short here because we've got to play a couple of tunes in between. The sports report is only that the Bulls are playing on Sunday. The Sox are doing well, and the Cubs I'm not so sure about. We're going to go out with a tune by Pastor T.L. Barrett and the Youth for Christ Choir. We do that because following our show is the wonderful Gospel Memories by Bob Marovich. And this is a gospel tune that is very beautiful. And we'll be back next week. Well, I won't, but Katy Hogan will be here. And I know a lot of you are glad to have her back. She's been gone for a few weeks. Sometimes we'll be here together, sometimes one or the other. Have a great week. Continue to do good in the world because the world needs all the good that we do. Thank you to everybody who makes this show possible. Lynn Orman Weiss, Emilio Davis, Gwen Brown, Luis Mejia, Katy Hogan, Tom Clark. There's a whole bunch of people that are involved with this, and we're really grateful. Have a great week. All power to the people.
Power to the people.
Over and out.